Betsy McCaughey is a Trump supporter who's listed as a member of Mr. Trump's economic policies. We're talking taxes.
Thank you.
You heard there, Christina Alessi, putting into perspective the tax plan.
She left out the most important part of the tax plan, which is the reduction in corporate tax rates. That's what's killing the economy. American companies pay the highest corporate tax rates in the world, not just nominally at 35%, but across the board, the average is about 27%, much higher than other countries in the world.
The Committee for Responsible Tax, whatever the foundation is, says that tax cut on the corporate tax will raise the deficit by $2.3 trillion. It
will not. Let me explain why. And in fact, the Tax Foundation has demonstrated why it will actually increase revenue over the course of a decade. We collect about $273 billion a year in corporate income taxes. But when you lower corporate tax rates, you increase business activity. Companies invest more in the tools that labor uses. Wages go up. Income goes up. Corporate income goes up. And as a result, just a moment, as a result, tax revenues go up. You see an increase in the payroll tax. You see an increase in individual income tax revenues, and over the course of a decade, you will see a $400 million per year increase in total tax revenues.
But in Donald Trump's plan, not only is he cutting the corporate level, he's cutting the income tax level as well.
That's right, but I do want to make one more point about this.
Before we get to your other point, if we may, and at the same time, he's increasing expenditures on things like defense whilst protecting social care.
That's right. It reminds us very much of what Ronald Reagan did.
Yes, and he ballooned the deficit. He ballooned the deficit.
That's right, he did. But over the course of a decade, he produced enormous prosperity. Here's where I'm coming from on this. Voters this time around have a choice between class warfare and economic growth. I'm choosing growth, and here's why. 8 million more people are living in poverty today than when Barack Obama took office. 14.5% of our people are living in poverty. And why? Stagnant wages and few job opportunities.
But the entire Trump plan rests on greater economic growth.
That's right.
And nobody has ever seen the level of growth necessary to make up the shortfall from tax revenues by lowering taxes. So, a question. Do you accept that in the short term, this balloons the deficit?
Oh, there's no question that it does. But Americans will be better off. They are enduring very stagnant wages. And when you cut...
That's not true. The wage growth has risen. If you look at the last numbers, wage growth is up between 3 to 5%.
It's not satisfactory, and you know it. And more or less, more than that, our economy is now limping along at 1.2% growth, despite robust consumer demand. Why? Because businesses are not investing.
No, with respect. I accept that 1.2 to 1.5% growth is subpar, but...
Subpar? We can't survive with that. Under Reagan's recovery, it was 4.5%.
They were different eras with different economics, and if you take the U.S...
We can get back to that.
We can
get back to that level of growth.
Not when you've got the EU growing at less than 1%.
Ireland grew 7.8% last year.
That is completely fallacious, and you know it, because... Because Ireland was coming out of a dramatic recession, and it was a bounce back as a result of the bailout.
Look at their corporate tax rate, 12.5%.
Yes, and look at what's happened with Ireland and its corporate tax rate at 12.5%. And look at what the UK is proposing to do because of Brexit.
Slash rates. They're all slashing rates to be competitive, except the United States, where Hillary Clinton is running ads that say corporations ought to pay their fair share. That's the most demagogic ad I've ever seen. Americans ought to know corporations are paying the highest rates in the world here.
So, do you also support, along with this, measures to, for example, allow the repatriation of overseas money?
That's a very good idea, because that temporary repatriation, I'm glad you brought that up, will bring in $2.1 trillion, which will enable companies to invest that here in the tools for productivity.
So why go for, other than, frankly, political philosophy...
I like your spirit, by the way.
Well, I could admire yours as well. The estate tax. Now, all right, inheritance tax, death duties, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
You must accept that it will only benefit the truly rich.
Well, it will benefit people who start small businesses and want to pass them on to their children, and farmers. This is a major issue in the agricultural parts of the nation.
You can change the rules to allow for farmers without giving Donald Trump and his family a $4 billion advantage.
You're falling for that class warfare rhetoric. You know it's kind of silly.
No, I'm not. It's a fact. I mean, God forbid, Mr. Trump. I mean,
if somebody works their whole life to build a drugstore chain or a farm, why should they have to sell it because the estate tax at 50% was taking half of it?
But why give the truly rich tax break at the same time?
They've already paid taxes on their income.
Well, all I hope is that you will come back to discuss other aspects.
It's a deal.
Because there's a lot more that we need to get to grips with.
Absolutely. We talked to next time regulation.
Plenty of talk about regulation. We'll regulate the regulation. Thank you. Stay on. Thank you very much. Now, on Wall Street, I'm exhausted. On Wall Street, stocks fell from Monday's records.